Hello and welcome to the podcast. For the start of this week's show, there's only 3 turkeys. The 4th turkey's worried about Thanksgiving, so he's running around trying to turn himself into a chicken, is young Blackie. But we got Brasher and we got Fooey, so we'll just jump straight into our review of Week 9. And gentlemen, halfway through the football season, who would have thought we got 9 rounds through and we haven't lost a single round of COVID? So pat on the back to everybody.
Yeah,
that's very debatable. If you watch Thursday Night Football, you would swear that one team lost the game because of COVID.
I have a feeling we're already talking excuses, but we might park them and we'll come back to
I don't need an excuse for that.
I really want to talk about the outstanding game of the week, which was, and I know you're all hanging out for it, the Texans against the Jaguars. I mean, that was just the outstanding highlight game of the week, even better than what was trotted out on Monday Night Football. JJ Watt, 100 sacks. How good is he? And does he get traded to a Super Bowl contender for next year? Brash?
Who can afford him?
You think he'll put his price up, or do he take a pay cut for the sake of having a Super Bowl?
It could be the 3 strike rule. Yeah, he's on top dollar. It's going to cost multiple high end picks, at least 1 first rounder, probably 2, and we've got a reduced salary cap coming up. So teams are going to be looking more and more towards the draft to keep their rosters intact. So it doesn't bode well. Probably should have traded him at the start of this year.
Probably would have gotten a much better return, or even towards the end and trade deadline last year. But then again, I guess Bill O'Brien as general manager kind of probably doesn't make those sensible decisions.
Would have made too much sense.
I will say that, and this is, again, not meant to be a slight on Mr. Watt, but the thing that I really wanted to talk about out of that game wasn't the 100th sack, and I know that's what got a lot of the media attention, because he isn't the first player to get 100 sacks. However, he had, and it doesn't get a lot of attention, the difference between the stats these days, but he had 8 quarterback hits in that game against the Jaguars, and their outstanding new quarterback, Mr. Luton.
I was going to say first gamer.
With those 8 quarterback hits, he has 273 quarterback hits for his career. Now, that is the most ever in the NFL. And that, I think, because there's an argument, and I won't bog down too much in the semantics of it, but there's an argument to say that it's much, much harder to get a consistent run of sacks these days because of the way the officiating has changed from where it was in the 80s and the 90s, and that it's in much the same way as the defensive backs have a much harder game. The front defense has a much harder game to consistently get sacks. But quarterback hits has kind of become the new replacement, where you almost get a sack but not quite. And for me it's interesting because he's had a lot of injuries in the last few years, and people talk about him dropping off a cliff and that, but he's still clearly the best that the NFL's ever seen in quarterback hits since that statistic was recorded. So just wanted to put that out there. Any reaction, Brash, or are you not surprised by that?
Yeah, and if you I know he gets to play them twice every year, but if you take out the weak opposition in his own division relative to how many sacks he gets in other big games against good teams outside of his division, I think you'll find his stats are okay at best.
Bog average is what you're saying. All right, cool. Fooey, did you notice that Deshaun Watson had his 6th straight game with multiple touchdown passes?
I did.
And that's without DeAndre Hopkins to throw to, isn't it?
Yeah, no, he's still a good quarterback. Yeah, so I just did it again. Well, I said, yeah. Stop it, Anthony. Oh, Fooey, I mean, shush. Yeah, no, he's a really good quarterback.
More fucking editing. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. It's not enough when Brasher does it. The issue for me is not so much that he's able to throw the ball. The issue is that despite Bill O'Brien's best efforts, he's managed, it would appear, to develop a pretty good relationship with a number of different receivers. Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks especially. Is that something that arguably Aaron Rodgers could learn from?
I think if Aaron Rodgers had more than one good receiver, I think he would.
You missed the point completely. It's not about having any good receivers. It's about whether you make them good or not.
Oh, does Valdez-Scantling catching 2 touchdowns, that make him and Rodgers make him he look good, or what? Or is it
because
Tonyan catching 3?
It was against the 49ers 37 string defensive back.
Yeah, no, look, no, we underrate Watson just because he's had some really poor coaching and GMing. But yeah, with some competence there, I think we'll see. We were talking about him as, you know, a top 3-4 quarterback last year, and there's no reason why. He's got all the talent in the world. So yeah, make of that what you will.
So the quarterback whisperer is sitting on the fence when it comes to Mr. Watson.
I'm saying he's a good quarterback, even without good receivers, which he's got. I don't think he has great receivers, but he has good receivers.
Well, we'll follow that up with a follow-up question, and this is statistically driven. Brandon Cooks in that game became only the 9th player in NFL history ever, going right back to the so this is right back into the 30s. He's only the 9th player ever to have a 50-yard catch in every one of his first 7 seasons in the league. Does that mean he's good?
Yeah, I'm actually a Cooks fan.
You understand we're not talking about the cook that makes the nuggets. We're talking about Cooks the player. Yes.
yes, indeed. Yeah, he's never really put together a huge season, which I think due to injuries and who knows what else. But yeah, it probably doesn't rate him up in a lot of people's books. But he can have these huge games every now and again, and I guess consistency would be a benefit to him and just about everyone else, I guess. But yeah, he's decent.
Throw another in there for me.
Maybe.
Beautiful, perfect, excellent. So we'll immediately jump to the other really scintillating game of Week 9, which was the showdown between Ryan Tannehill and Nick Foles. Of course, Fui, your boy Ryan Tannehill shone out in the end, winning by a massive 7 points. What is it about the Chicago Bears that causes the sputters, do you think? And I'm only going to ask this because he's not actually on the podcast yet. Was Blackie right when he said that the Bears were somewhat fraudulent?
Oh, he's 100% correct. I think their longest run of the day was a fake punt, and Barkevius Mingo took that for 11 yards. I think they were, off the top of my head, 3 of 18 on third down.
2 of 15, actually.
Oh, there you go. I knew it was something like that, and I think they were 3 or 4 on fourth down. So yeah, I guess when it comes to the moments on third down, they don't perform, which is not a good sign for any offense.
Brash, what's up with the run game? Is it? I mean, specifically for the Bears here. I'm not looking for excuses about the 49ers.
Are they even attempting to run?
Well, it's a really good question. It takes me back to the Andy Reid. Of course, and Matt Nagy is arguably of the Andy Reid coaching tree. I believe that there's been 6 games in a row where Chicago have rushed for less than 100 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And only 8 times have they rushed for 100 yards since the beginning of last year.
All under Matt Nagy.
Yes. Does that suggest that perhaps he has a philosophical problem with the position?
Well, after a bit of a false dawn, their quarterback situation's been a hot mess now for 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
2 years.
I would say 20, but
Nick Foles is doing as what we expected, or as I expected. When he's playing with his own money and not house money, he is exactly the quarterback that he really is. I watched bits and pieces of this game, and the Chicago offense just has no identity at all, right? You just, you start to watch some of the better offenses around, even some of the more dynamic ones like Seattle and Kansas City, and you can still sort of predict what's going to happen before the snap, what play is going to be called, or if it breaks down, what's going to end up happening. There is absolutely no continuity. There is no rhythm. There is no identity to what Chicago's trying to do on the offensive side of the ball. And as Chicago has done, and it's funny, Fui talks about 20 years, it probably has been 20 years, that they're just going to waste another good defense without being able to score the barest minimum, which is consistently getting over 20 to 25 points every game to be in a game, regardless of how good your defense is.
Yeah, I just don't understand that. It's almost like there's a hatred for the run. The difference that really stands out is you can understand Chicago not having a lot of runs if they had an outstanding wide receiver group to throw to. If you had a wide receiver group that's had, say, Ayuk and and Jerry Rice and Randy Moss, then of course you wouldn't run the ball. You'd be using your weapon. I don't think that you could argue in any way, shape or form that in the last 2 years the Bears have had a dominating group of wide receivers, and yet they just completely ignore the running game. I just don't get it.
They Foles attempted 52 passes. 52
like his arm's going to fall off.
52 passes, right? It's a little bit like Australian rules football. Like if you ran off the field in an AFL game and had 30 possessions, you're pretty well guaranteed the Brownlow votes that week. Now 30 possessions is nothing, right? You'll have half a dozen players in your team in one team get that every week. With now 30 passes in a game was a high water mark for a quarterback. Now 52 is nothing. We don't even think twice about it. You know, a few years ago, I think someone last week, it might have been Burrows even, that threw for 60, attempted 60 passes, right?
Yeah, you made the point in last week's podcast. You can't keep using him like that because his arm will fall off. You know?
Well, you just can't expect that to be sustainable long term. So you look at the game. Yeah, sure, Tennessee got out early, so they were consistently two to three scores down from relatively early in the game, but Tennessee only scored 24 points against an offense that kept giving them the ball back. And I'm not talking about turnovers, I'm talking about very short, because when you throw it 52 times and the ball hits the ground, the clock stops. So you're giving plenty of time back to the opposition. So they scored 24 points. Chicago scored 17. Sure, they scored a couple late, but at no stage, given the state of that game, did Chicago warrant giving up the run. Yeah, sure, Montgomery got hurt, but are you really going to put the game on the back of Nick Foles dropping back 52 times?
Well, the other thing is that who they're up against, because, again, I don't wish to be disrespectful to the Titans, but they are not the number one rush defense in the NFL.
Who was missing their best pass rusher for the game?
Absolutely. They gave up bloody 12 yards on a fake freaking punt to Barkevius freaking Mingo, who is hardly the world's most fleet-footed. You know, you're not talking Tyreek Hill.
And that's how desperation it was, wasn't it? Even in a relatively close game, you're going for fake punts.
It's ridiculous.
Because you just, you know, there's just no, you know, well, I can't remember the box score on this, but I think Chicago scored twice in the last late or something like that. But they had 3 points for 3/4 of the game, over 3/4 of the game.
And that was despite throwing the ball 50-odd times, you know.
At home.
Yeah, and if there's ever a city that was built around a legacy, a history, a culture of run the ball, it's Chicago. Because, I mean, Soldier Field in a nutshell. Why would you try to be a finesse passer when your home games are in that situation?
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's so brutal. It's not even worth talking about anymore.
It was truly a tea-towel game, but for me, it puts, and we talked about this when we did our season preview about whether the Bears were secure in their coaching or not. As far as I'm concerned, that was the nail in the coffin. Nagy will survive. You know, he'll get through another year probably, but as far as I'm concerned, he's done as an NFL coach. The fact he can't get a productive run game going in against weak opposition like the Titans' run defense. I mean, the Titans are a very good offensive team as long as they have Derrick Henry. They always will be, but they're a piss weak run defense team. And if you can't get more than 56 yards against them, that's a coaching fail. You know, that's just anyway, enough of that. The outstanding, and because I know quarterback whisperer, you are such a fan of Phil Rivers. We'll throw to you for this one. The Phillip Rivers versus Lamar Jackson showdown. Phillip Rivers was shown up by the younger Lamar Jackson. I thought it was a reasonably entertaining game for the first half, but then disintegrated when Rivers started making poor decisions. Did you see it that way?
Yeah, I watched a little bit of it, and that's pretty much like most Rivers games. You know, once he hits that, he generally hits a spot and he just kind of loses his shit. Yeah, I would call it a standard Phillip Rivers game.
Yeah, because you don't think he should be in the Hall of Fame. I was surprised that he threw to 8 different targets who had catches and another 2 that he targeted but who didn't catch the ball. But while he threw to that many people, the biggest day that any of those receivers had was a 55 and a 56-yard day. So that's a lot of throwing. It comes back to Brash's comment about 52 attempts. Rivers had 43 attempts, but only for 227 yards. So a shit ton of those attempts must be going backwards or sideways at the line of scrimmage, yeah?
Yeah, he is. He's Breeze Mark too.
He's turned into that, yeah.
Yeah, an interesting game in the sense that I thought the defense from the Ravens really shone out. I guess my question mark, we talked about, the Phillip Rivers weakness, I guess, in overthrowing and making mistakes and he actually only had the one interception. Wasn't helped terribly much by Jonathan Taylor having a really bad fumble, but he couldn't get the completion radar going. He was, running at 25 or 43. Lamar Jackson only actually attempted 23 passes, but he hit on 19 of them. That's a pretty damn decent completion rate. I didn't think he was convincing Brash, but he was back to his, I guess, more systemic approach. Would you describe it that way?
He looked pretty average in the first half, and I think what set him up was he had a couple of longer completions that accounted for well over. I think two of those passes accounted for more than 50% of his total yards for the day.
Yes, yeah.
Right, so he's dinking and dunking all over the place all day. If you think about it, then that way. I don't know. He's certainly not 2019 MVP at the moment.
No, 13 rushing attempts, Fui, but only 58 yards. What's happened to Lamar, the 200-yard rushing back?
I think he's trying to be a quarterback.
Yeah,
he's not there yet, but he's trying to probably gain that respect from the league.
Well, and speaking of gaining respect, I'll use that as a segue. We also, in Marquise Brown, have a bit of or Hollywood Brown as he's popularly known, do a bit of a, not to be confused with Hollywood Brown that's in the White House. He had a bit of a dummy spit at the end of last week's game on Twitter, as all the educated young things like Fui do. And that turned out really well because he actually had 3 receptions this week for a massive 38 yards, and he was targeted 5 times. So he got the most targets, but he only caught 3 of the 5 targets. So that's kind of like putting yourself on a pedestal for, I don't know, chicken nugget eater of the year, and then getting the nugget stuck in the back of the throat when you have your first nugget. But anyway, I thought it was interesting that I didn't think the Ravens were very productive at all in that game, but they got through, they got a win, and I think we'd agree, boys, that the Colts season's done, yeah?
No, they still have to play the Packers. So can I just say on that game, it really turned on that interception, and I will go into bat for Rivers here, where I really don't think that was an interception, and I'm shocked that it got overturned on replay or whatever it was. And I don't see how this hasn't created more of a stir, to be honest.
Because of who it was. Anyway, because it was Phillip Rivers in Indianapolis. Yeah, that's why playing Baltimore, who have more often than not have finished on the right side of the ledger when it comes to officiating. So there are some teams that are protected species when it comes to officiating, and they're one of them. I wouldn't say the Packers really are, but
we've had some bad ones.
Yeah, you had a good one on last week, but
yes, we did.
But that's okay. Nothing surprises me anymore with officials. I cannot believe they did not, given all turnovers are reviewed, I cannot believe that one got the green light.
Did you see it, BPG?
Yeah, I would rank it as, and I saw somebody on Twitter saying that it was probably since the video review came in, it was, I think they said it was either the 3rd or the 4th worst non-reversal, and I'd put it right up there. I mean, it was just stunningly bad. It's one thing, you go back when I was growing up, and officials would make mistakes, but there was never, you just couldn't go to the replay. You couldn't, and you'd see the slow-mo replay at 120 bits where it was all grainy on the screen, and you'd have to get up close to the screen and you'd argue about what the replay showed, but it didn't make any difference because the officials never had a review ability. For them to have that review ability, and it's not 1975 anymore. They don't have one camera behind the goalpost. They have 10 different angles on every single bloody play. For them to have that footage available to review it and to leave it as it was just disgraceful.
I'm talking out of my hat here, and it's never going to happen. But I'm getting a little bit disillusioned with football at the moment. I'm putting it down to just everything else that's screwed about 2020 at the moment. But I am tired of watching games being decided by officials.
Yeah.
I genuinely am. I am just so over, and a lot of people make big deals about the call in the last second. That's an interception halfway through the game, and as Fui's correctly pointed out, that changed the entire momentum of that game.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
But now there's a counter argument which you could make, and which if I was Martha Ford looking at the Colts from the Lions, I would be saying, well, that wouldn't happen in the Lions, and that's a weakness of the Colts organization because the Colts folded. So, and I think there's a really good comment by Tomlin because somebody asked Tomlin about rough calls and why they
like they've ever had one. Like Tomlin's ever had a bad call.
And Tomlin at least faked the answer that, well, we just got to overcome that. And I do think that the disappointment, it's one thing for the Dallas Cowboys with Gilbert Grape as their quarterback to fold when they have a bad call. When you're paying someone like Phillip Rivers freaking millions of dollars a year, you're paying him that money supposedly so that when things go wrong and shit gets tough, he stands there and gives the rah-rah speech on the sideline. He doesn't fold like, I don't know, Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. Anyway, you get my point.
If it's tipped off someone's fingers or he legitimately throws a bad throw and it's intercepted and it is a legitimate turnover and an error, I absolutely agree with that. But when all you're asking is the official to make black and white rulings at the right time, no. I'm tired. There are a couple of rules, as Aussie Dude always picks me up on now. My absolute disdain for the unnecessary roughness, warrant sportsmanlike conduct, whatever they call it, on quarterback late hits. That one is my number one pet hate. Number two is there are teams out there who are coached and there are plays in their playbooks that are designed to draw PI. There is no intention to catch the ball. They are, you see the ball get thrown in the air and the quarterback's already thrown his arm up in the air for the flag even before the ball lands. Right?
And it isn't just Tom Brady that does that.
No, there's a couple of quarterbacks and teams I'm not going to name who I have seen the same play over a couple of years being called for PI from the same team, same quarterback, same wide receiver, same route called, and they're nearly always at game critical situations, typically third and forever, and that sort of stuff. Yep.
And quite often on plays that if they had not made the bad call and not refused to review had they gotten the review right and changed the call, it would have been effectively a reset. Let's have another attempt at that.
They had an opportunity. Like they should, instead of going full carte blanche PI challenges, what they should have done was for specific circumstances seek a ruling on. For argument's sake, if you're aggrieved at getting a PI call against your DB because you know the wide receiver was holding first, then make it for that specific thing. Not the whole play. Just say, well, he was holding first. Check that. Okay, you're right. Passing complete. Let's go on. Not because we all know if you review every single line of scrimmage, every single one-on-one, man-on-man, wide receiver being covered by a DB, you will find PI. You will find holding. We know that for a fact. Right? On just literally every single play. So it's just that selectively when they choose to call them, that's frustrating.
And I think too the thing that makes that really hard to understand is that when Marcus Peters is there on the video, it isn't like his feet are obscured. It isn't like some fat ass assistant coach is blocking the camera angle. It was there. It was clear. But I will say this, and I'm not one to want to hype on it because I'm, as you all know, I'm not a fan of the Baltimore Ravens ever since they employed the murderer on their football team. But I will say that I believe it was the 12th defensive touchdown that they've had since the start of 2018.
Yes.
And that's the most defensive touchdowns of any team. So while that particular
that's probably more touchdowns than the Jets' offense has scored.
Defensive offense or offensive offense in New York?
Said it before, Gase is the defensive mastermind.
Can you wait till we get to the Jets? You can't just jump in and just talk about.
I'm leading things now.
He's in there now.
So yes, just to wrap up the performance, I much as it grates, and we all saw the Marcus Peters non-interception. It was called an interception. The reality is that you do have to give them credit for the fact, much as it makes me grate my teeth, they have a productive and enormously impactful offense and a remarkably productive defense. And I think for all of Lamar Jackson's failings, and let's be really clear, I think he's got massive failings, with that defense, he's always going to be capable of being a threat. And I don't know how they do it, but the Ravens Patrick Queen is the latest one. LJ Fort. They just keep doing it, Anyway, I've said my piece. We're now joined apparently by Blackie, so we might quickly jump. We've just reviewed the 3 T-Tail games of the week. We might get to the actual T-Tail game of the week, which was Matt Ryan had a win. Brash, did you enjoy the Matt Ryan show?
Did they play? I didn't even know. Sorry. Who was Atlanta's wooden duck?
Denver Broncos.
No, I didn't pay that one a lot of attention, mate. You might just edit that whole out, even asking me about that one. I'll have to do a bit of research on that game because I didn't watch that one at all.
All right, Philly, did you watch, or should I just throw to Blackie?
Throw to Blackie, but I didn't know.
All right, fuck you, and fuck you too. Damn it, I've been working on that all week. Jesus. All right, Blackie, defend yourself. How could you lose to the Matt Ryan? He threw an interception, for Christ's sake.
I think the play calling from the Broncos just is no good until they get a couple scores behind, and I don't know whether it's because the defense starts playing prevent or they start changing it up, but they just look considerably better when they're a few TDs behind. The run game was I think the difference. Broncos just couldn't get anything going on the ground, but I mean, there are a few things to like, namely the great man Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, he was awesome. I thought Noah Fant wasn't abysmal either. But
yeah, he's just a bit banged up.
Yeah, he's clearly worn down. He needs another couple of seasons to build himself up and get used to NFL level hits and impact. But it worries me when I see that Drew Lock is the second highest rusher on your team when you're paying a dude called Melvin Gordon but not using him. 6 attempts for 18 yards was abysmal. I mean, for Christ's sake, KJ Hamler had almost as many rushing yards off 1 attempt. You should reach out. Seriously, you should reach out and see if you can get Barkevius Mingo to come over and do fake punts for you. That might help your running game.
I would say nothing would make me happier than them using his DUI and incoming suspension as a reason to void his guarantees and just ship him off. It's crap. But at the same time, they don't trust Philip Lindsay on 3rd down.
And it's not like he hasn't performed. He had like 300-yard games already this season. I appreciate that the guy is not a high-profile. He's not Antonio Brown in terms of his social media profile, but he's a bloody effective running back. He just gets the job done, But they won't give him the ball. Anyway, you may guess that I tipped the Broncos to beat the Falcons, and I was wrong. Fuck, I'm angry about it. And it isn't, to be frank, it isn't like Matt Ryan had you see that score of Falcons with 34 points, and you think, oh, Matt Ryan must have gone off. He did not. Matt Ryan is very much, I think, Brash, it might have been you that talked about he's a trade option for somebody that's looking for a quarterback who thinks that they're in the window next year and the year after.
No,
I'd be real careful about that because he was not. And I don't want to be rude to the Broncos, but they don't have their world top 10 defense out there at the moment with all the injuries and stuff. And he was very, very dodgy.
He's on big coin. He'd be another one that'd be very hard to take on his current salary.
Yeah, there'd need to be a deal struck, I'd say. Which, if you're Atlanta, you probably can get away with doing that if you do draft a rookie QB and have him on a cheap contract.
Well, it says everything that the 100-yard game in receiving yards for the Falcons wasn't Hayden Hurst and it wasn't Julio Jones. It was Olamide Zacchaeus. You would have picked him straight away, Fui, as the guy that would rack up the 100 yards.
I'll be honest. When I watched the game against the Packers, he did kind of stand out as a possible, because I think that game Gage was out as their number 3 and he stepped up and looked pretty good. So it wouldn't have surprised me, to be honest.
Yeah, he could have been one of those wide receivers that you guys could have taken in the 7th round. He didn't. Yeah. All right. We've been kind of dancing around it. I have to say this was a week that was really. We should be able to get this podcast finished in about 3 minutes because the 4 best teams in football weren't playing because they were on the bye week. But we've been dancing around it. I think we should just admit it. The outstanding game of the week was New York and Danny Dimes. Blackie, you would have been over the moon. Danny Dimes racking up a win.
I saw that he's 1 win, 17 losses against everyone that's not the Washington Redskins, and he's beaten them 4 times and lost 0 times. Danny Dimes.
If he just played every game he ever played against Washington, he'd be undefeated. Pretty freaking awesome. Brash, for the more somber side of it, how ironic was it to see Alex Smith have to go into a game when someone else had a dislocation and fractured ankle?
Yeah, pretty ugly one too. And poor old Alex looked $1 million early too, and then then fell in an absolute heap. Probably because he got because Alex Smith, I'm unabashed lover of Alex Smith, and apologist probably more appropriately.
I was just going to say, I hope you use protection, but anyway.
Yeah, how do you think his leg got that way? The thing about Alex is such a good team man. Like, he even took the note, we might win this, we don't really want to, because I need to stink it up, get the L on the board, so I put my club in a better position to draft a quarterback next year. That's the kind of thing Alex Smith would do for you. Throw three interceptions late and 2 in the last quarter to toast his own team to make sure that they get a better draft pick in the quarterback sweepstakes next year.
Yeah. The main thing is they're still in contention for the division title there. So
they're actually got the best of both worlds. They could still win their division and they could still get a top 5 pick.
And at least in theory, if they play their cards right, they'll do both.
No, they can't. It's impossible. The worst they can finish is 16th.
You're assuming that Jerry Jones, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the New York Giants are all not disqualified from next year's draft due to COVID breaches. That's a large assumption.
Not in the first round, they won't be.
On that happy note, Philly, coming out of the 8th best division in football, were you surprised that Danny Dimes managed to actually not throw 3 interceptions?
Yeah, probably. I guess after last week, it was. I guess he couldn't have played much worse. So anytime you watch him last week, then you see him this week, and he looks like he's done a complete 180. So he looked half decent. So what do you do with that? You just wait for him to either really blow out and fail or succeed.
Jesus, you're insightful, mate. God damn, you're insightful. And he probably could have had a win or he could have had a loss this week, right? Yep. All right. I know when we're flogging a dead horse, so we'll move right along to the game we have been skipping around. Young Blackie, did you? I know that you probably would have put all your money on the Aaron Rodgers shit show to foul again. But were you surprised at how well he played against the 97th string 49ers? Or was this one that we just put down to the COVID, and it's why Brash sounds so depressed this week?
I think there's a couple of really badly busted coverages that probably helped him. I think the O-line did a really good job, and I thought Vera didn't play as well as he has been in the last few weeks. Was probably the difference. Even Valdez Scantling's cement hands couldn't stop Rodgers from having a massive go.
Oh, Philly, I think you just got your answer about Valdez-y boy. Oh.
Yeah, we know Rodgers makes average receivers look amazing, and he looks amazing receivers look all time.
Oh, yeah. One thing I did want to bring up was the 4th and 1 play call was one of the ballsiest things I've seen in a long time. Throwing out in the flat like that. Yeah, a lot can go wrong doing that.
Yes.
But they pulled it off.
Against the 97th string 49ers defense. I will say that I was surprised and, how can I politely put this, really disappointed at how bad the tackling still was by the Green Bay defense. And I don't know, because you actually had some players back this week, Philly. It wasn't, you had Gary Rashan Gary playing. Jair Alexander was playing. It wasn't like you had injuries that had some of your better players out on defense. And they still couldn't freaking stick tackles. They did eventually, but it was like 27 attempts. Do we need to deploy Brasher and Blackie with tackling bags?
Yes, anything. I don't care what it is. Someone teach our guys to tackle.
Like, why is it so much different? Like, have they just got really bad gloves that they wear this year that make them slip off?
Oh.
The 49ers bring their silken nylon uniforms? I don't know.
Well, every team bringing their silken nylon uniforms, apparently. I'd love for it to be not us, but it is.
Anyway.
All right. So should we just move on? I was a bit.
No, we're not allowed to move on yet. We're not allowed to move on to this game because we're going to talk about the NFL's COVID policy. So let's bench four guys who all proved negative. Surprise, surprise. And depending whether you listen to American Crow or about fudging negatives versus positives or the true accuracy of these tests anyway. Had they delayed the game one game, under the protocols, they would have all been available. If they delayed the game one day, they could all play Friday night, but they couldn't play Thursday. Yet we cancelled, the Titans openly broke COVID rules and got a week off, right? Didn't lose points, didn't have to play with half a roster or anything. And then just to rub salt into the wound, it later was revealed the Packers actually played a player positive with COVID in the game. So the NFL, this was a game we were never going to win because, my confession, since Monday last week, I've been scouting quarterbacks in the 21 draft. So I've moved on from this year already, but I just couldn't understand how that game went ahead. And I know, you're a 49ers fan, you're a homer, blah, blah, blah. No, I would have, me, guys, from about now, I would have brought this up just as strongly had it been any other team. 4 players. Let's just think who they were. All 3 wide receivers. Right. Don't need those guys. Particularly since all our other running backs are injured, and our tight end, and our left tackle, whose replacement his inability to block a guy one-on-one without putting a move on caused an intercept and a fumble that directly resulted in 14 points to the Packers. Yet the game goes ahead, and they can all play this week.
Oh, but Brash. You're forgetting. The reason why the NFL made that decision was because you got Jordan Reed back.
Yeah.
He was healthy and fit.
That's another thing. And that's the only other thing I wanted to bring up from this game was, Salah, can you please take note of how other defensive coordinators take away other teams' number one weapons? Everyone knew Jordan Reed with Noodle Arm Mullins would probably be the primary receiving threat for the 49ers. So he was double-teamed continually. Good show, Packers. Can't fault you for that. Have a look on the other side of the ball. Every single week, the premier wide receiver who plays the 49ers, even though they have outstanding, even with all the injuries, still top 10 defensive numbers for pass yards allowed, touchdowns allowed, blah, blah, blah. But every single week, the opposing team's number one wide receiver goes for 100+ yards. Metcalf, Packers, every single week. Week 1, Hopkins, every single week. The number one wide receiver against the 49ers goes for 100 yards. It is the easiest fantasy football money you can make. So maybe a little bit of double teaming every now and again. I don't know what Jimmy Ward does at free safety. I think he guards the goal line half the time. That's my rant about the 49ers.
Brash, and Blackie, I'm going to be looking to you to back me up on this one. But Brash, I think you're missing 2 really critical positives that your team should be celebrating from the rafters. Number 1, hat tip and shout out to Dave Chappelle. You blokes have a performing wide receiver named Richie James.
No, I'm Richie James, bitch.
And 400 targets.
How did he go?
184 yards and a touchdown off only 9 targets.
Yeah, if you go back and look at all 9 of those, just check out where the nearest Packers defender is at any given point.
It's like the Packers defenders lined up on him and looked at the name on the back of his uniform and they're like, he's a rap star. We don't have to worry about him.
That's because they were triple teaming Reed. That's why.
I think he had 9 receptions, but he had more targets, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of drops, or it was Mullins. Mullins ain't going to hit anything 9 times in a row.
No.
He's not going to hit first.
I want to be I don't want to be negative towards Richie James, but he had some not quite as bad as that bloke Valdez for the other team, but he had some instances of pretty bad drops. He could easily have made 50 yards. 50 fantasy points and 200 yards if he'd caught them. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. But the other thing you're missing, and this remains one of my ongoing themes in this crazy season that is 2020. Punting doesn't lie. I'm sorry, you can frick us all around with bad video replays by officials and bad COVID rules about who's eligible and who's not, but you can't hide good punting versus bad punting. And Wisniewski for the 49ers, the boy just keeps, good old Aussie boy, keeps trotting out, not an Aussie dude, but an Aussie boy, keeps trotting out, decent.
Technically he's a New Zealander, but anyway.
Yeah. Trust you to burst my bubble, you prick.
It's a standard Australian
to
rule,
claim the New Zealander, yeah.
Claim a New Zealander.
Speaking of New Zealand that would be claimed as Australians, except they're not Australian, Fui.
We still claim Crowded House as Australia's greatest ever rock band.
Oi, that is not true.
So, I know, Fui, I'm sorry. AC/DC for you. Yeah.
No, hell no. Tism, anyway.
Cold Chisel.
No.
I could see you getting around the streets in your black T-shirt and flannel shirt.
No, he said Tism.
Actually, I can see you still doing
Tism.
That. Not Chisel, but yes.
Brash doesn't know who Tism is. Fucking hell.
I know. Really?
He doesn't know who Tism is.
Do they have a vinyl record?
Yes, they would. Yes, they would.
But only because they're cool dudes from modern hip Melbourne.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
Fui, you've been remarkably low-key and non-celebratory. I will give you exactly 20 seconds to celebrate the fact
to retort.
The fact that hang on, I haven't told you specifically what you are limited to celebrating, and I will edit anything else out, including all your ums and ahs. Jordan Reed had 3 times the number of yards that Jay Sternberger had, but not quite as many as Robert Tonyan had. Who's the better tight end?
It's Tonyan, surely. He's an up-and-comer. Was that supposed to be a rhetorical question?
Tonyan reminds me a lot of George Kittle.
They look very similar.
Agree to disagree on that.
Is BPG even still here?
That's what I'm not sure of. But have you not seen their matching man buns?
Yes, they do have matching man buns, but different tattoos.
Oh, right. That's how they look similar.
Yes.
You're supposed to still be talking. Jesus.
We were,
but...
I will finish on one slightly positive note, just for you, Brash, because I know you've had a rough treatment, the old COVID pineapple from the NFL. Jerry Rice thinks that Brandon Ayuk will be the big deal. That's a pretty positive, and I mean this in all seriousness. I'm not being ironic or stupid. I think when you have a guy like Jerry Rice, and let's face it, Jerry Rice is not out there in the media. He's not your Tony Romo talking head that's over every channel all the time, or your Boomer Esiason or whatever. When you have somebody of Jerry Rice's caliber say that he's got route running, he's got the hands, he's got awareness on the field, that's pretty high praise for somebody that is as young and undeveloped as Ayuk is. Would you agree?
I admit I didn't really, there was so much attention on the top 3 wide receivers last year and whether one would fall to the 49ers, and most of my study on Ayuk was after the pick. Notwithstanding the Brasher jersey curse, he's going to be a star. We just got to find someone to throw him the ball.
Yeah. And on that last note about who threw the ball, Blackie, Mullins, was he really that bad, or can you see them picking him instead of Garoppolo as their Steve DeBerg transition quarterback?
I didn't think he was that bad at all, but I've always thought he's okay. Moves the ball reasonably well. Their run game's obviously not as good now that they're playing with their 6th or 7th string. I think the problem is he makes some really good passes and then he does some dumb stuff. He's kind of like Carson Wentz light.
It is a 49ers trait now.
270th of the price.
It is a 49ers trait now that out of nowhere, it doesn't matter which one of them it is, will just throw a scratch your head, what the fuck, pass out of nowhere, straight to it. And it's not even close. It will go just straight to the DB.
All right, moving right along. Sorry, Brash. Moving right along. I know this would have been Brash's favourite coaching performance of the week. And by performance, I mean the theatrical performance on one of the sidelines. Buffalo Bills beat the Seahawks, and this podcast's outstanding, and I am being dead serious when I say this, our outstanding analytical prediction that the imbalance in time of possession could not be sustained for a whole year. It's coming true. It's coming true. Were you happy, Brash?
I was very happy watching the Buffalo Bills. It didn't matter who they were. It was a bonus who they were playing. They were awesome, especially early. That was a good game of football. That when Josh Allen's on, he's as good as anybody. I just love the way he goes about everything he does as a quarterback. And the defense is not bad. Could it be now that Buffalo has spent so much time focusing on their defense rebuilds over and over again, trying to exercise the demons of losing all those Super Bowls, have actually now, without almost by accident, have an offense now that way outshines their defense.
Quarterback whisperer Fui. Josh Allen had 415 yards and 3 touchdowns, 280 passing yards, and all 3 of his TDs were in the first half. Is he a one-half quarterback?
Well, yeah, he probably hasn't been put in a lot of negative situations just yet to really excel. That's an interesting question. I will say no.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't like there was a massive snowstorm hit Buffalo in the second half. Yeah, we're talking about similar weather conditions, similar teams, similar personnel. You put up 3 TDs, 280 passing yards in the first half, and what happened?
Yeah, but probably there wasn't as much a need to what were they, 24-10 at halftime. Yeah, I guess he was my number 2 quarterback of that year. And
Jesus Christ, back in 1927 when Fui was prognosticating about which fantasy draft he should anyway. You can't really judge one half from the other. I don't think. I think that's unfair. But he played a good first half. Blackie, has Fui missed the point? And in the second half, they did the right thing when you're up by 24 points, or when you got 24 points on the board, you switch to your run game and you do your run game effectively. And they scored another 2 TDs in the run game. Was that brilliant coaching?
Yeah. I think that is brilliant coaching. Most teams do that. I think the only team I can think that springs to mind that isn't a fan of that is the Atlanta Falcons in Super Bowls.
Or the LA Chargers for the last 7 weeks. But yes.
They'll have a run game.
They've got Josh Herbert. He's not bad at running around the football field. I guess for me, the other thing that stood out, Brash, about this game was, and it's hard to know where to put it in the scheme of things, and I raise this with you because you're both defensive-minded and you do have a real love for the Seahawks and their coach. 44 points in a game is the most that the Seahawks have allowed since 2009, which is the year before Pete Carroll was their head coach. That's, everybody's bashed the Cowboys all year this year for how bad the Cowboys defense has been. Seahawks have arguably been a shit ton worse.
Seahawks absolutely the worst defense in the league.
It's almost like they need Wilson to be perfect. Like he cannot make a turnover.
100% they need to do. Like what did the week? I know the week before he played the 49ers, he turned the ball over a couple of times and they lost, right? And on Sunday he threw intercepts. One of an absolute dolly. I don't know what he was thinking, into double coverage in the red zone. He threw another intercept and he fumbled at least twice too, from what I remember. So all of a sudden, the way Seattle's offense goes, that's probably him handing the ball over 4 times. That's probably 14 points minimum that he's cost his team, let alone what. So not only is the defence on the field too long, but let's make it a bit longer for them, right? They can't stop anybody.
455.8 yards a game given up by the defense.
And opposing quarterbacks are on track, if they played Seattle defense every week, are on track to pass for 6,000 yards in a season.
Jeez. That's
The
a
scary
nice
thing
stat.
about that is you turn around and you say, oh, Russell Wilson's nearly averaging 400 yards of offense every game. That's fabulous. That's MVP standard. But then you put that defensive number on the score sheet. 455 yards given up every single game. I mean, Brash said it, 6,000 yards a season. Apart from Danny Dimes wanting to play Washington every week, even Nick Mullins as backup would want to be playing the Seahawks at the moment. I just don't get it.
I tell you what I can see Seattle doing for the rest of the year, and they did it in the second half against Buffalo, and they did it, and I think in the game against the Cardinals until late. I remember Blackie even commented on it, like they've just got no, on the thread during the game, that Seattle just has no pass rush at all. And then they started blitzing, and they blitzed literally every down. And that's what I think it's going to have to take for them to be any chance to progress in the playoffs, because at the end of the day, they can't generate a legitimate pass rush unless they're playing the 49ers. And I say that seriously. Mate, they lose this weekend, they're not even leading their division anymore. If they
Blackie, you'd be using the phrase somewhat fraudulent again?
Oh, no, I don't know about that. I think
So you're a Russell Wilson believer.
Well, how could you not be? He'd be pretty much leading the MVP. I think while they're letting him cook, they're going to be a contender. When Jamal Adams is back, they'll be better. But they've got to learn to use him better. He needs to be closer to the line.
Yeah, he'll just blitz all the time. I don't think you can call them fraudulent, because they are exactly what they are. Extremely explosive on offense and extremely frustrating on offense, because if you're playing against them, you can play 3 perfect defensive series in a row, and then all of a sudden, bang, 70-yard touchdown to Metcalf, right? That's how they're playing, right? They have no continuity. It's just big chunk plays is their entire offense, and everyone knows it. And on defense, they're rubbish. So I don't think they're a fraud. They are exactly what they are.
Blackie, just to give you a bit of data and stats, unusually for you, Jamal Adams actually played in the game and he had 1.5 sacks. So he also had a spectacular sideline argument with Pete Carroll, but we won't go into that one.
But they need to stop playing him in coverage, because I think he's ranked like in the bottom 5 or 6 in coverage stats. And the big difference maker he was at the Jets was he just helped the run game and just made stuffs.
And went where he went and did whatever he wanted and went wherever he wanted. He basically freelanced.
Yeah. Well, and I think when you put him in an offense that's got Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, and Carlos Dunlap, he's not the senior, I'm the star, I can do whatever I want, And I will just give a hat tip to Jarran Reed. Not a big fan of Seattle, but Jarran Reed's actually starting to impress me as a really reliable defensive player on a defense that's shit poor. And one other hat tip, and Philly, this is right up your channel. How refreshing is it to have a running back called Homer getting the ball? And that was Homer with an inside run, and I kept expecting to see the little yellow-skinned, fat-bellied dude with his... Yeah, anyway, I know. It was that sort of a game. You had to look for something funny like that. But it was one of the more entertaining games of the week. Speaking of the entertaining games, we won't talk about the Panthers or the Chiefs, really. But we will talk. No, we won't talk about the Raiders and the Chargers either. How would you feel to be a Chargers fan? Brash, I know you've had a tough week. Well, not that I've ever actually met an LA Chargers fan. I've met a San Diego Chargers fan, but not an LA Chargers fan. What would you say to them about the chokeability?
You know what? Big picture, I would be very excited to be a San Diego, LA Charger fan, because I don't think they had an expectation that they had their franchise quarterback, at least not this quickly. He's outstanding. He along with Allen are my 2 favourite quarterbacks to watch at the moment. So they weren't expected to go far today. Look at the division they're in, right? Look, they're probably legitimately third rung off the ladder.
Yeah, in a good year. Yeah.
Right, at the moment, right? The fact that they're now on Earth and got good, meaningful playing time, and they're not losing because of that guy. I think he only threw that one bad pass in his first game when he got intercepted, when he threw it to nobody other than the defender. So if I was a Chargers fan, I'd feel really good about things because I've got my franchise quarterback. He's just outstanding. He can do everything, and you got something you can build around. And they're not that far away. Their defense is pretty cool. They just need to grow up, I think, and put these games away. I think it's just growing up. It's just learning to win, learning to be a bit ruthless in the last quarter, which will come to me.
Fui, at the Chargers, the LA Chargers, really Hawthorn 2006. Was that the problem?
2006 Hawthorn was shit. The Chargers aren't that. I guess that's where I disagree. The Chargers aren't that bad. Herbert is the real deal. I've got, now that I'll have some time on my hands soon, I'm going to really look into the Chargers games, I think, and just have a good look at him. But I think he's a fortune changer.
Ooh, that's a big call from a quarterback whisperer. Ooh.
And it's kind of like what I said about Joey B and the Bungles, that it takes they've got a winner at quarterback now, and it's going to take a little bit for the rest of the team to kind of catch up and start to believe.
Come on, Blackie, back me up. Is it just that the Chargers need a good coach so that they don't take it away?
I don't know. Sometimes
Thank
Lynn
you
does
for that
good things.
incisive analytical approach.
Sometimes Lynn's really good, but they just go to water when they're ahead. I don't know what it is. Maybe they're doing it on purpose so they can get a high draft pick. I legitimately think if they get Derwin James back and a high draft pick that they can spend on whatever, I think they'll be in a position where they don't really have that many weaknesses. It'll be a luxury pick. You just take the absolute best player available. They'll be pretty formidable next year.
Yep.
Thank you for backing me up. I really appreciate it. Barry.
Anytime.
All right, let's move on. Quarterback whisperer.
So they're basically everything the Philadelphia Eagles are right now.
Let's move on. Quarterback whisperer. This one is for you. We saw, I guess, two quarterbacks play each other. I know that would have been scary for you to watch two quarterbacks play each other. And there were also quarterbacks who both were number one playing each other.
Yes.
And Tua beat Kyler. Here's a stat for you. Kyler Murray is the only person in NFL history, going back to when you had separate NFL and AFL competitions. AFC, sorry. Yeah, anyway, you know what I mean. He's the only person in NFL history to, in a single game, pass for 275 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, rush for 100 yards, and score a rushing touchdown. And he fucking lost. What's the deal out of that game with those two young quarterbacks? Don't forget to say will you?
I think that it was obviously a pretty good showing for Tua. Got to showcase his skills a little bit more. Obviously, it's a first time ever type of game for Kyler, but I think he's pretty much the Jackson of 2020, but probably not as good. Definitely not as tall.
Fuck, that's insightful.
But well, look, it was a good game, but as you said, they didn't win, so does it really matter?
Blackie, is it more important in this day and age? And this is almost a question because I know you're the young'un on the panel that's all into the Gen X and Gen Z and Gen 27 or whatever. Is it more important to throw for lots of passing yards, score lots of passing touchdowns, rush for lots of yards, and score a rushing touchdown, or just not turn the ball over?
I think it's a big part of that's how good your defense is, to be honest. Depends. I mean, I think I've spoken about it plenty of times, is what's your team's identity? If your team's identity is Mahomes, I'm just going to score 50 points, it doesn't matter how many you score, fine. Maybe that's what they're going to do with guys like Herbert. I don't know. But then there's other teams where the defense is going to give up 50 points, and therefore you just need a game manager there who's not going to turn the ball over and be good enough to put up 17 points.
Exactly.
I do think in this day and age, though, where officiating's favouring the offense, you can't get away with a game manager anymore.
No.
So which one is Murray? Sorry.
Well, in this game,
he's just sorry.
in this game, he got him 130 more yards offensively. Basically, the 130 yards came off his own damn effort between passing and rushing, but it wasn't enough. And that's my point. And it isn't. And I want to put it. I'm not being sarcastic. Well, not much anyway. It isn't. He did not do what other quarterbacks have done and implode and throw 3 turnovers or 7 turnovers in the game. He only had 1. That's not. That's a pretty damn good effort from any quarterback to only turn the ball over once in a game. You'd be sitting back going, that's pretty good. And then you say, not only did he only turn the ball over once, but he did something that no quarterback in the entire history of the NFL has ever done, and yet it wasn't enough.
Yeah, but that's a Cardinals gone a Cardinal, right? Because in this game, and that's probably the best I've seen Kyler Murray play as an all-round quarterback in this game, because he actually did throw passes from inside the pocket downfield.
Yes.
First time I've seen that consistently. But, he got his team... They had the ball with a chance to tie it and even win it, right? They had the last possession, essentially. And, Cardinals got a Cardinal. They had 3rd and 1, couldn't convert it, 49-yard field goal, and it comes up short. So now we've got a field goal kicker. We've been talking all year about field goal kickers making them from 55 and 58, and someone hit fell 3 inches short on an NFL record this year. He didn't make a 49-yard field goal to tie the game and send it into overtime. So Cardinals got a Cardinal. Yes, that's exactly the Cardinals' way. Kyler Murray was brilliant, touchdowns, throwing, passing, running, all the rest of it. But do the simple thing like kick a 49-yard field goal to take the game a bit further. Couldn't do it. I've seen Cardinals do this over and over and over again.
It's just because he's short, isn't it, Brash?
Oh, well, you can't blame Murray for it, mate. He was last time I looked.
That's how he was born, yeah.
He wasn't the field goal kicker either.
I will agree with you. I'm only being half as a ginger. It's not our fault we're born gingers. I will say I was, and I should have mentioned it before when I talked about that first time ever in the history of the NFL stat. The thing that was super impressive about that passing yardage was it was not your Carson Wentz throwing a pass after you've scrambled around for 37 seconds all over the field. He threw from inside the pocket for the vast majority of that yardage, which is not something that Kyler Murray's ever done before to that extent in the NFL,
He also shared it around a fair bit as well.
Yeah.
Yes. And it wasn't like he just had DeAndre Hopkins and that was it. He used every way. And part of me said, because, we've been pretty critical about some of the Arizona coaching, part of me said that showed it was real interesting to see the Cardinals offensive coaching staff debut a much more balanced and diverse and multifaceted. It wasn't just the DeAndre show. They actually had a deliberate strategy of exploiting every possible angle they could get. And yet Miami, and I didn't think Tua was anywhere near as spectacular as Kyler was. His stats certainly weren't, but he got the win. And my open question to you guys, and I guess we've already had it answered by Brash, but is it more important to be spectacular or safe?
Well, I think you're underestimating how good Miami are. I think they've got the hallmarks of very, very good side. It's hard to believe that a little over a season ago people were accusing them of tanking. And being one of the worst sides going around. It would be like if the Jets turn things around now and within a season were a playoff team, probably capable of winning a playoff game. Because I think there's no doubt to me that the Dolphins are, they don't have a very good running game. Their quarterback was making his first start ever, but they've done well with recycled players on defense that are just awesome, like Landon Roberts, Manuel Ogba, Jerome Baker's playing really well. They've drafted a few. They've spent a lot of money on their cornerbacks in Jones and Howard, but it's working for them. I think it's their defense that's their identity at the moment, but they've also got a whole lot of draft capital to build around Tua with, and just because he probably didn't have the gaudy stat lines that the other rookie quarterbacks have had, but it's because he didn't need to. He still looks smooth.
That's my point. You don't if you're managing the game and you're being safe, and it's what the reason why I'm bringing it up is because Jesus fucking Christ, I so wish Carson Wentz would get this fucking message. You don't have to be spectacular and tough and gut it out. Just don't turn the freaking ball over. Don't turn it over.
I think you're projecting.
I think it's. I think Blackie's 100% right. The Dolphins. It wasn't just him that won the game for him, right? Just like it wasn't Murray that missed the field goal. It wasn't Tua that stuffed the third down conversion attempt that led to the long field goal either, right? So it was a team effort from the Dolphins. And you know, mate, we've seen plenty of games where losing quarterbacks have 450 yards. That seems to be the norm these days, right? You know, Nick Mullins was god-awful the longer that game went against the Packers on the weekend and threw for 300-odd yards. I can count, you know, you go back to Joe Montana playing for the 49ers, and a normal stat line for him would be 18 of 23, 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the 49ers won by 40 points. So I think Tua is in a much better position because I think the Dolphins are one of these teams. It's not so, I won't call it safe, BPG. I'd call it they play sound football all round.
Potato.
No. Safe is being too scared. Safe is being a caveman. Instead of burning your fingers trying to learn how to light a fire, you use the sticks to barricade yourself in a cave. Being solid.
Gee, I wonder what that is referring to.
Being solid as a football team makes a tackle when you're supposed to, stops the guy when you're supposed to. That the Dolphins field goal kicker kicks the go-ahead field goal on the previous possession, and the Cardinals one misses his. That's a difference.
Yeah, it does help when you have a reliable kicker, and Sanders is a very, very good kicker.
Yeah, so they play solid football. And it started last year and the fundamental difference between Miami and the Jets is Miami has a clear plan of what they were doing. They mailed in last year with the intent of where they were going to be this year. Whereas the Jets just have no idea whether they're playing for this year, next year, or the next coach.
And it was really obvious when the Jets played the Dolphins, the quality difference in the head coach. I mean, let me be really clear. Brian Flores is not yet Brian Belichick. They're just called Brian. They're not yet the very naughty boy. But the difference between having a Brian Flores who's settled and who's driving and clearly connecting with his players and somebody like a Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland or a Matt Nagy in Chicago, it just shows out. And I think for me that both of those teams, the Cardinals and the Dolphins, are both 5-3 at the end of this game. I reckon the Dolphins are on the upward streak. I'm not sure about the Cardinals, especially. And Blackie, last comment on that game, but Blackie, Simmons as a linebacker or Simmons as a safety, have they worked it bloody out yet? Because he's got so much potential.
No, I think the biggest issue is he probably is a linebacker, but that's probably the position that they're richest at. They've got athletic linebackers as it stands. They've invested in it. They probably thought they'd be able to move him around to be a sort of matchup nightmare on defense, but it's just not happening.
Yeah, I think ultimately it was a bad draft pick. Not a bad player, just a bad draft pick for the situation for him. It's funny, we were joking about it the other day about quarterbacks going to the wrong place and having their careers ruined. Simmons could absolutely end up in that situation where he's a
defensive Sam Darnold.
Yeah, pretty much. So
somebody who plays for the Packers and misses his tackles by as much as Darnold misses his passes.
But clearly Trevor Lawrence must listen to us, because you hear the story during the week that he's talking about staying in school one morning.
Broken by BPG. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and if it was me, I'd absolutely do the same thing.
Speaking of Brash's breaking stories, and let's face it, it was talked about in the season preview, and our guest season previewer of that particular division, Mr. American Crow, might have had some slightly choice words for this particular team. He may even have said that Mr. Tomlin was on the hot seat. Let's face it, Brash, 14 years without a losing record, and they beat America's team.
And they get a historically, well, in recent history, particularly over that 14 years, they pretty well get 4-win start on the rest of the competition every year.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about their officiating advantage.
They get the Browns and the Bengals twice a year. The only other team that gets such a leg up were the Colts that get the AFC South. And
Forget about the schedule.
And the Wooden Ducks that are in that division, right? So I don't care about Steelers when you got the officials more often than not on your side. You got a quarterback that actually plays better when he breaks a leg. Everything just goes your way. The Steelers are the true darlings of the NFL, and they always have been. I'm with American Crow on this one.
So,
yeah.
How can I put this politely? Blackie, I know you're a big fan of the Roethlisberger. Is he really that good to be 8-0 and the first time ever in the history of the entire franchise? Or has he just been lucky?
Well, look, I think he's been very lucky, right? He's been in a good franchise for a long time, a franchise whose identity goes past putting on the shoulders of the quarterback. I mean, what was he, one of the youngest Super Bowl winners of all time? And it's because every year their D-line is awesome. Every year they've got wide receivers that they draft that are really good. Their run game looks good no matter who is running the ball. And their O-line is always one of the best. What more could you want?
Philly, were you impressed as a quarterback whisperer with Roethlisberger's 15-point last quarter come from behind effort, or were you more encouraged by Gilbert Grape's effort as the starting quarterback for the Cowboys?
It was probably a good start for Gilbert.
Better than Gucci Danucci?
Oh, clearly. He's got a better nickname at least, so that's the start. Roethlisberger, he's a quarterback. He's actually, well...
I thought he was a punter.
Let me finish. He's a quarterback. He's not a game manager. He was earlier in his career, absolutely. Similar to Brady winning 2 Super Bowls with a good defense. That's all Roethlisberger has done. But he can make the throws. He can do anything you ask of a quarterback, and he does win games. So he's now he's got a lot of experience. He's probably not as mobile. Could probably stand to lose a few pounds just to maybe lengthen that career a bit. But
and shorten his chin strap.
But he is a quarterback, and there's probably not many that I would. There's probably only maybe a handful that I'd take above him.
Speaking of quarterbacks, let's just have a look who he's rolled this year so far in his head-to-head contact. Danny Dimes. Was Locke injured when he played? I think Locke got injured in that game.
Yeah.
It was Wingnuts Driscoll.
Yeah, they killed him.
Yeah, they killed. That's right. They killed Rippon, didn't they? So Rippon, Watson without any supporting cast at all, Wentz, Mayfield, the Titans quarterback,
Tannehill. just only 3 points in that one, and a very underwhelming Lamar Jackson.
There's a lot of first-round draft picks in there.
A lot of busts too, man.
Well, can I just be really, really, we're not talking about a franchise that has Jerry Jones and a truckload of fucking cash.
Okay, let me riddle me this, Batman. Had one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league been quarterbacking any of those games where they won? Probably only the Browns game, they got blown out. But other than that, would they have beaten the Cowboys with Prescott? You could question whether you would question whether they would have beaten the Broncos with Locke.
I get what you're saying, but I think you're underestimating how good that wide receiver core is.
I thought we were talking about Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. But Roethlisberger's adjusted his game this year. That, to me, they look different this year. And they look different because Roethlisberger seems to be playing more within himself, but also recognizing the talents of his wide receivers instead of picking a favorite, which might have been Antonio Brown or it might have been Juju Smith-Schuster or whoever, and just making that one person the star. This year he's spreading it around, and he's recognizing that and the Steelers have done this for many years. They've got wide receivers out of their ass that are bloody good wide receivers.
Yeah, but they've always had multiple wide receivers. It's one club that's always fielded multiple wide receivers of quality.
And the reason why I question what you were saying, I get what you're saying, which is if you put them up against a first string Denver Broncos with all Denver's players fit, does Roethlisberger and the Steelers win that easily? But I would argue that I don't think the Broncos' first choice secondary, even with their absolute elite defensive backs that they've got on the field fully fit, probably still would have been stretched by those wide receivers. And that's what makes them different this year. I think that's why the Steelers are the 8-0 for the first time in their history. I should add, I thought they were utterly unconvincing for 3 quarters. I thought they were abysmal. Gilbert fucking Grape made them look ordinary. And it took a really bad throw by Gilbert, a bad turnover, to change the momentum in the game. But you got to give them credit. They toughed it out and they got the win, you know?
And, you know, things get so much tougher for them coming up. They play the Bengals this week and the Jaguars next week. 10-0's coming up.
Undefeated.
Bengals will win. I'm putting it out there right now.
I'm actually just getting onto armchair right now. I'm changing that one to Bengals as well.
Blackie, are we talking an undefeated season?
Please.
Undefeated regular season. Well, look, they've got Bengals, Steelers, Ravens, Washington, Bills.
So they're playing themselves.
Ravens.
They got the Bills. They'll play the Bengals.
What?
They got the Browns. No,
What
I
are
don't
you
think.
talking about? They're going to lose this week.
Yeah, they're going to lose this week. I reckon they could lose actually 4 of the next 4 on the run home at least. They got the Bills, but I'm sure the referee will pull something out of his ass just to get them home there. Some mystery horse collar or something. Bengals. I'm with you, Philly. I reckon they're a big chance against the Bengals this week. They've got the Jags. They've got to face Alex Smith in Washington. Got the Bengals again. Double chance, mate.
No,
they're not going regular season undefeated. No way.
And I'm disappointed, Brash. You had an opportunity to mention what I thought was one of the worst calls of the week, which was a horse collar call on the interception return. And it was almost like the sort of horse collar you'd expect from the Packers with their effective tackling. The Cowboys player not only didn't horse collar, but he barely touched.
I don't know what officials are watching sometimes when literally I can see a post on Big Footy that says that's a false start before the quarterback's even got it in his hand. It's so obvious. The post is already there. Someone's posting it. I don't know what they are watching half the time anymore.
I was going to bring that up later on, but given you bring it up, we may as well bring that up. I'll go back to the T-tail game between the Texans and the Jaguars. You know, there's this thing, and Fui, I mean, I know you have your nugget eating clock, and Blackie has his clock for when he does his diaper changes and his feeds for the better half and all that sort of stuff. There's this thing called I think it's a shot clock or a waterboy clock it's a game clock. That's right. And it has on it a play clock for each play. And stop me if I'm getting this wrong, but when it expires, when the clock expires and goes to 0, if you haven't snapped the ball, I believe it's a penalty. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Well, Deshaun Watson in probably, and before I talk about the call, I think we would all agree that a 77-yard touchdown pass was probably a pretty important play in the context of any game. Yes.
Yeah, occasionally. Yeah.
The 77-yard touchdown was thrown when the ball was snapped 3 full seconds after the play clock hit 0. That's how bad the officiating has gotten to this year. The play clock goes to 0. It stays at 0 for 3 seconds. That's as long as it takes Fui to say, and they still let the play get off. I've had enough. It's a fucking joke. It costs $1 million a week to put the officiating team out at every game. $1 million a week, and they can't watch the damn clock. My rant is over. Let's talk about Drew Brees.
No.
Let's talk about Tom Brady.
No.
Oh. Don't take away my fun.
Stat hounds. You can talk about it. I need to go get a drink. They're just stat hounds, those two. That's all they care about.
All right, we'll wait for Brash to come back with his drink.
No,
In
you
the
guys talk
meantime-
about it. You guys talk about it because I don't want to talk about that game.
But Brash, obviously
What?
you missed my post. You were addictively following every one of Fooey's posts and every one of Blackie's posts. You
When?
missed I only posted twice in the weekly thread this week.
Yeah, but you post late, and normally I'm fucking over it by then. So actually,
Here's me thinking that you're always fucking over me.
nah,
I mean that
technically
not in the
nah,
giblet, not
no,
the way the
technically
giblets
I'd
screw
work
me
for-
over.
Nah, the giblets got home in a bit of a cliffhanger this week. Lucky we picked up a defence that actually scored points for us. So, otherwise, we would have got rolled.
This was the first time in 20 years that Tom Brady's been swept.
Yep.
You've all paid out of me mercilessly about how crap the 8th best division in football is this year. But Jesus Christ, we wouldn't go 20 years without a sweep. Is it?
Yeah.
Is the AFC East really that bad?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, absolutely, it's the worst.
20 years? Really?
Point to something in that division that's from the weekend that you can say, yes, it's a division of promise.
Let's talk about Monday Night Football. No, let's not. Let's do that in a minute. Blackie, I know you love good young quarterbacks, and I know you have lots of positivity about Reclamation Project. How do you feel about Jameis Winston coming out? He didn't turn the ball over.
He ate the W.
Key player. Couldn't have done it without him.
No, of course not. They just sent him out there as a big fuck you, and good on them.
It was,
Philly?
wasn't it? Yeah.
Fooey, did you appreciate the Tom Brady sideline rant, head helmet smash?
He is a diva. We know this. So I don't think any players acting like that is really appropriate, especially an elder statesman of the game like Tom.
You're saying he's old.
I'm saying he's up there, yes. If he's older than me, he's old.
5 of his 7 interceptions have come against the Saints. That's almost like Rodgers' pick 6 record against the Bucks. Brash, if you haven't drowned yourself with whatever you're drinking, how can I put this politely? Tampa Bay ran the ball 5 times for 8 yards.
Which is?
Tom Brady exercising too much control over the offensive play calling? Blackie, you can answer that one. All right, Fooey, fuck it, you can answer that one.
I do believe that was a league record for the fewest rush attempts in a game.
Mm-hmm.
And wasn't one of those a kneel down also?
Yep.
Yep. So is Tom controlling this, or is it our man with the funny hat?
Well, and that was really what I was trying to segue when I said to Brasher, how did he feel about Tampa Bay running the ball only 5 times for 8 yards, as Fooey, with his impressive research for the first time in 7 years on the podcast, he's also been able to add that one of those 5 times was a kneel down. So it's actually 4 times for 8 yards. But anyway, Brucey came out and then I guess wasn't entirely politically correct and gentle in his performance appraisal and upwards feedback to Mr. Brady. If you were in Brady's shoes, would you have pointed to the run game imbalance, or was that because of Brady's call at the line of scrimmage?
Bruce Arians has demonstrated all year that he's not going to take any shit from Brady. It's about the 3rd or 4th time he's
Agree.
made it very clear who's the boss.
I guess my question was a little bit more nuanced. It was how would it have been unfair for Brady for the first time, because I think all the other criticisms were very fair. Who's responsible for only running the ball effectively 4 times in a whole game of that's one run play a quarter, for fuck's sake. If you're Tom Brady, do you turn around and say, well, I didn't get my 6 rings by running the ball once a quarter?
He got the last one because a team chose not to run. At the end of the day, he's calling plays at line of scrimmage as well. He can audible into something else. I don't know what the cadence is for. I don't think anyone officially knows what the cadence is the way Arians calls his plays in. It's just one of those nuances, and I'll go back to why I didn't want to talk about the game. Both of them are stat hounds, and I reckon if Brady had an opportunity to call audible out of a run into a pass, he probably would have taken every opportunity he could to do that, particularly when the guy who's running neck to neck with him is regularly passing for TDs in the same game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. On the record, it'd be interesting to hear both Brady and Breeze respond of whether did they change run plays to pass plays. I have a fundamental problem anytime any team in the NFL runs the ball once a quarter. That's bullshit. I'm sorry. I mean, you think about all the people that put bets on, and I'm not encouraging children. You should not become a bettor. If you're listening to this podcast and you're under the age of 18, betting is bad.
No, bet all your money. Give it to me if you don't want to bet.
Gamble responsibly. Get Philly to fill in your tickets.
That's right.
But were you a betting person, you would not have expected this. It's almost like it's a handicapping exercise where somebody's decided that they're going to slant the result. It verges on a completely unfair approach to the game. And I'm not just a stat head when I say that. I'm certainly not a stat head. I just think fundamentally it's like taking a game of AFL and turning around and saying, well, you're not allowed to handball this game. It changes the game. If you're only running the ball 4 times in an entire game, it's just bullshit. Anyway, I've had my rant.
I'm a bit perplexed by your reference to the gamblers, though. I have no sympathy for how a game turns out that affects a gambler, right? Because gambling followed the sport, not the other way around. So that's the risk you take, and bad luck. And besides, the NFL doesn't need their quarterbacks to influence games. They've got the officials to do that.
And COVID rules. Let's not forget COVID rules.
No, more the official.
I clearly wasn't clear enough. My point was more if you were slightly more cynical and untrustworthy like I was, you might do a Chicago Black Sox investigation and find out if there wasn't a massive payout to 1 or 2 particular punters because the ball was only rushed 4 times.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I don't know if that was a bet that someone would have had. I think that would be. Oh,
but Fui was going to make it. He just forgot.
The connection would have been made pretty quick. I don't think it was about protect. Well, they got belted by 30 points because there was no issue about covering.
35 points actually, but anyway.
Yeah, so there's no issue around covering. So
all right, we move on to the game. For me, the game brought back some great memories. And in last week's preview episode, Brash was pretty wholehearted, and I think we all agreed with him. He was pretty wholehearted in his condemnation of the Monday Night Football schedule and the fact that it displayed the outstanding excellence that was the Patriots against the Jet. And I have to admit, I completely forgot this myself. Obviously, clearly, we all forgot the rivalry around the Belichick coaching appointment resignation saga that unfolded, I believe it was about 20 years ago, when, for those that aren't familiar, Mr. Belichick was appointed coach and resigned on the same day so that he could go up and coach in New England. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe New England actually wound up having to trade a first-round pick.
Correct.
Blackie, was that a good trade?
Of course it was. Come on. Now you are being silly.
I mean, their first-round picks usually end up shit anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you don't see it much these days, but I think the last 2 times it's happened, it's yielded a Super Bowl, hasn't it?
Yes. And arguably the pick that was traded away, that was used, has yielded a suboptimal player, shall we say. Brash, one of the great fuzzy feel-good parts of that story where everybody gave the blow-by-blow. What happened 20 years ago when I thought Bill was going to be my coach after the other Bill in Parcells resigned, and then Bill wasn't my coach? You would know a bloke called Victor Green, who was the Jets safety for a number of years. You got to give the bloke credit. Bill Parcells resigned on the Monday, and on the Wednesday, Victor Green had a hand-engraved Tiffany paperweight presented to Bill Belichick that had the word Jets inscribed on it. Hey, Bill, really happy, because, of course, Belichick had been an assistant coach at the Jets for a couple of years. Hey, Bill, really happy you got the head coach job. Here's a paperweight. 24 hours later, that paperweight was probably being used for something else. What's your, I guess, perspective? Because
where are you going with this, mate? I got nothing on that.
Well, good question.
Well, you're one of those people that often is able to project what happens to things that are 25 or 30 years old, like a Joe Montana helmet that was signed, or a Steve DeBerg helmet from when he played for the 49ers. My question to you was, what price do you think, because I know you're a very commercial bloke, what price do you think the hand-engraved Bill Belichick Jets Tiffany paperweight, note that a Tiffany paperweight retails for about $500 US. What price do you think it got at auction?
$100,000.
Oh, Jesus, I'm glad I tried that gag. All right, we won't worry about that. All right, cutting.
I have no
quickly
idea
to-
where you're going with that, mate. Seriously.
I was trying to make a joke. It obviously fell flat. More seriously, Fooey, who is tanking harder, Adam Gase or Bill Belichick?
Oh,
You fucked up, Brash. You don't get the easy questions anymore.
I don't know what you lost me at paperweight.
I would. I honestly think the Jets are trying. To be honest, I just think they're that bad. So I think Bill kind of failed at trying to tank. It's just not in his nature.
So, Blackie, should they have tied Cam Newton's shoelaces together? Was what was needed?
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking while watching it. I thought they were trying very hard to out tank the Jets, but you've got Cam pretty much on a vet minimum contract, who's thinking about his next contract. As said all along, it's a business decision playing in New England, and he knows he won't be there next year. He was always going to try his absolute hardest. I think there's probably enough quarterbacks in the upcoming draft where they can snag one and turn him into a superstar.
Can they both win? Can they both get good quarterbacks, or is it going to be the Jets or the Patriots get a good quarterback but not both?
I'd say what'll probably happen is Lawrence will go to the Jets and Patriots will get someone like Wilson, and then Wilson will be an All-Pro for 10 times in a row. Lawrence will be 2-time Pro Bowler.
Insightful.
Yeah, I can see Trevor Lawrence having a Matt Stafford type of career.
Yes, but not a Phil Rivers type. But not a
If he
Phil
ends
Rivers.
his jet. Or a Phil Rivers, yeah. Or a Phil Rivers, yeah. Good in the top, more often than not, in the top 10 in the NFL as a quarterback, but never ever taking his team to the promised land.
All right, I'm disappointed in you, Brash. You had the opportunity to make this joke and you didn't.
Which joke?
Noodle Arm Flacco and Frank Gore, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe they're the oldest combination of starting players in a game in terms of combined age between a running back and a quarterback. Were you surprisingly pleased with how well Flacco played until the very end, or was he just always going to be a flop?
I don't know if I would be pleased with how Flacco played one way or the other. No, I didn't know that. That was a piece of trivia that obviously went over my head as far as the oldest combination running back and quarterback at one time. That's something I'll sleep more easily tonight knowing.
Blackie, Denzel Mims, is he the real deal? Should Philadelphia have drafted him instead of Jalen Reagor or Hurts?
Yeah, I'd say so, mate. He looks good. He's getting opportunities. He's super athletic.
He's actually been out hurt, hasn't he? But
he's come back last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And he's been pretty much their full-time ex-receiver, getting, I think, probably 6-7 targets a game and converting them. It's been somewhat paralleled to Michael Pittman in the Colts. I think Mims will be really, really good. I was thinking this week, I think everyone who's saying, why would Trevor Lawrence want to go to the Jets? I think that's somewhat wrong. I think if Gase leaves, they've got a lot of draft capital, and then they've also got a lockdown left tackle who they just drafted, and Denzel Mims, and then a few other pieces. They'll actually be in a pretty good position. I mean, if they get Trevor Lawrence or Travis Etienne or someone like that, and then spend top of the second round on someone else to help, all of a sudden they look a lot better.
Fooey, I got a critical question for you. How much did the Jets jersey cost that you bought?
What makes you think I bought a Jets jersey?
There's a bloke called Fatukasi that plays for them.
It's just going to show that I am quite an athlete in my own right.
Yeah, Fatukasi. You can just imagine walking down the middle of the Burke Street Mall with that on, and yep, everybody. Oh yeah, that's that player. That's the Michael Jordan of the NFL. He did actually have a pretty damn good game, but yeah, I just thought that was an outstanding name to see on the back of an NFL jersey. Fatukasi.
I'm actually.
right.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm actually more after that stat with the coaches winning Super Bowls after being traded. I'm deep in thought about what would happen if someone traded for Adam Gase. I'm nowhere closer to an answer.
I don't think there's an equivalent stat for the defensive coach of the year on your own offensive players to pick up Blackie's ongoing theme.
But would he
if
win a
there
Super
was,
Bowl?
The Super Bowl losing? I don't know. Anyway. Last question or comment or observation, and Brash, I'm going to throw to you on this one because I know you're big on this. After the game, it turns out that the New York Jets organization has installed cameras in the smoke detectors in their locker room. The argument that was put forward by the Jets organization was that was a theft prevention device, noting that the New York Police Department apparently has not recorded any reports of theft from inside the New York Jets change rooms for the last 27 years. Obviously, yeah, anyway, I was going to make a joke about Joe Namath stealing stuff, but we won't. Is that really actually more of a COVID compliance control mechanism? Are they worried about losing draft picks and money after what happened to the Raiders?
Was it the MetLife management or the New York Jets that installed it?
New York Jets.
So at MetLife, they have separate lockers, yeah?
That's right. And it's only in the Jets change rooms, and the Jets change rooms are the sole and exclusive in terms of things like maintenance and painting and, your refits and all that. Sole and exclusive control of the Jets organization. So the stadium ownership actually can't do anything without telling the Jets about it first.
Okay.
Whereas the visitors change room, the stadium ownership can pretty much do whatever the hell they want.
I don't know. It depends what they were pointing at. If it was, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm glad I brought that up. Anyway, thank you for that. Wonderful.
Julian Peterson, if anyone ever asks, by the way, is the answer to the trivia question of what did New York Jets do with their pick that they got for Bill Belichick? They traded it to San Francisco, who drafted Julian Peterson.
And he did
a lot.
He wasn't too bad.
He was all right. He was a handy outside linebacker. Unfortunately, he was better when he went to Seattle than he was with us.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
And
Speaking of Peterson's, Adrian Peterson's MVP campaign had 13 touchdowns. Dalvin Cook's already got 12, including touchdowns in 7 consecutive games. I'll start with you, Blackie, because I know you don't bet. If you're putting your cash down for an offensive player to win the MVP, is he a bit of a smoky?
No.
Fuck you. Screw you. Fooey?
I was actually having those kinds of thoughts earlier in the week after seeing his game. I actually agree. I think it is a quarterback's award, but if he continues on this pace, he's making a lot of noise.
Well, let's face it, the Vikings are 3-5, but they're 2-0 in the last 2 weeks, and they sure as fuck are not 2-0 because of Kirk Cousins. Am I right, Brett?
Well, how many more times do you get to play the Packers? Because that seems to be something that seems to be something that they have in common with running backs who win MVPs. They get to play the Packers a couple of times a year.
Should we change the name of the Packers to the Can't Tackles?
The Green Bay Turnstiles.
Thank you for that review, gentlemen. We'll talk about next week's preview in a second.